I destroyed my husband without ever raising my voice, and now the silence in this house is slowly killing me too. I am 34 years old, and I finally realized that my quietness was a jagged blade I polished every single day. They called me patient and they called me calm, but they did not see the sadistic coldness deep in my dark eyes now. Every time my partner made a mistake, I did not shout, because shouting meant giving him a real chance to recover. Instead, I would simply stop speaking and watch him crumble under the heavy weight of the void that I had created. Silence is not just the absence of noise, it is a presence that fills a room until you simply cannot breathe well. I knew exactly how long to hold it before he would start apologizing for crimes that he did not even commit now. I enjoyed the power of watching a strong man break down into a million pieces just because I stayed so mute today. My silence was a boundary, I told myself, but deep down, I knew it was a slow poison I fed to him every single day. At first it felt like a total victory, because I never lost my temper, and I never ever said anything wrong here. But winning a fight by refusing to participate is just a way of suffocating the person that you once loved. Now, I watched him walk on eggshells trying to guess what was wrong, while I sat there with a frozen stone heart today. He would offer me flowers, and he would offer me tears, but I would only ever offer him the sound of nothing now. This was my way of keeping the upper hand, because the one who speaks first is the one who loses all power today. I was a master of the emotional desert, and I left him thirsty for a single word of kindness or even anger here. You see, when you yell, you show your cards, but when you stay quiet, you are an unsolvable and dark mystery today. I liked being the mystery, and I liked being the judge who never gave a sentence but still kept the prisoner now. I did not realize that by building walls of silence, I was actually building a tomb for our own connection here. He was trying to reach me through a thick fog of my own making while I waited for him to just finally give up. This is the story of how I killed the best thing I ever had without ever raising my voice to a loud scream. Now, I convinced myself that I was being the bigger person by not engaging in the petty drama of the world today. But the truth was far more sinister, because my quietness was a tool for absolute and total domination today. He would sit across the dinner table begging me with his tired eyes to just tell him what was bothering now. I would slowly sip my water and look right through him, as if he were a ghost haunting my very own house now. The tension in the air became a physical weight that pressed against his chest until he started to gasp now. I knew that every second of my cold indifference was chipping away at his sense of self and his worth today. It is a terrifying thing to realize that you can control someone's entire mood without saying one word here. I started using my silence even when things were going well, just to remind him who held the leash today now. If he laughed too loud or felt too confident, I would pull back into my shell and watch his smile fade today. It was a game of emotional cat and mouse where I was always the predator lurking in the dark shadows today. I enjoyed seeing him try so hard to please me, because it confirmed that I was the center of his universe now. My friends saw a stoic woman, but they did not see the sadistic pleasure I took in his quiet desperation here. I began to wonder if I even knew how to love someone without trying to crush their spirit in the process now. The internal contradiction was that I wanted his love, but I only felt safe when he was totally afraid today. Vulnerability felt like a trap, so I used my silence as a shield and as a sword to strike him down fast today. Every night we lay in the same bed, but there was an ocean of unspoken words between our tired bodies here now. I could feel him shaking next to me, wanting to reach out, but terrified of the coldness of my white skin now. The subtle control was so effective because it left no scars that anyone else could ever actually see today. I was the perfect villain because I never left a paper trail of insults or any physical marks on him today. The tension grew into a storm that was waiting to explode, and I was the one holding the lightning rod here. The storm finally broke one Tuesday evening when he stopped asking me what was wrong with my dark mood now. He did not bring me flowers, and he did not look at me with that desperate need for my validation today now. He just sat there in the heavy silence I had created, but he looked comfortable for the first time ever here. It was a shift that I did not expect, because I was used to him fighting to get back into my cold life fast. When I refused to speak, he simply picked up a book and began to read as if I did not even exist at all now. The weapon I had used to trap him was suddenly being used to shut me out of his inner world as well today. I felt a cold panic rising in my throat because my power depended entirely on his reaction to it all here. If he did not care about my silence, then I was just a woman sitting alone in a very quiet and dark room now. I tried to be even colder, but he just smiled to himself and started humming a song I did not know yet here. The turning point was subtle, but it felt like the floor was being pulled from under my tired feet today now. For the first time in years, I wanted to say something, but I realized I had forgotten how to talk well now. My voice felt heavy and rusted like a machine that had not been used for a very long period of time today. I watched him pack a small bag, and he did it with a strange peace that I had never seen on him before here. Every item he placed in that suitcase was a piece of the life I thought I had under my firm thumb here now. I wanted to scream or beg him to stay, but my pride was a cage that kept me locked inside my mind daily now. He walked toward the door, and I realized that my silence had finally become my own worst nightmare today. The consequence of my manipulation was that I was finally receiving exactly what I had given out before. He did not say goodbye, and he did not look back at the woman who had spent years hurting his soul daily. The loss of control was absolute, and the quiet house was now a deafening roar in my own tired ears today. I stood there watching his taillights fade into the distance while the air in the house turned into ice. I sank onto the cold hardwood floor and felt the silence pressing against my skin like a heavy winter shroud. The air in the room felt thick and stagnant, as if the very walls were exhaling the years of my bitter neglect. My ego, which had always been a towering castle of glass, was now shattering into millions of jagged shards today. I looked at my hands and realized they were shaking not from the cold but from the weight of my own cruel ghost. The brutal self-awareness hit me like a physical blow to the stomach, and I struggled to draw a single breath now. I had mistaken my emotional distance for a refined sophistication, but it was actually just a rotting decay inside. Every memory of his pleading voice echoed in the empty hallways, mocking the woman who thought she was a queen here. I could almost taste the copper of my own pride in my mouth as I finally faced the monster I had carefully built. My reflection in the dark window looked like a hollowed-out shell of a person who had forgotten how to feel warm. The psychological exposure was terrifying because there was nowhere left to hide from the truth of my own shadow. I had spent a decade crafting a persona of strength, but now I realized it was just a cage for a very small child. The silence I used to control him was now a mirror, showing me the ugly distortion of my own lonely and broken soul. I remembered the way his eyes would dim every time I turned away, and the shame began to burn like acid in my veins. My heart, which I thought was a fortress of safety, was actually just a barren desert where nothing could ever grow. I reached out to touch the space where he used to stand, but I only found the biting chill of my own hollow victory. The ego dismantling was a slow and agonizing process of unlearning the lies I had told myself about my own power. I was not the protector of my own peace. I was the warden of a prison where I was the only prisoner left behind now. Every second of this newfound clarity felt like a needle under my fingernails, forcing me to stay awake in the dark. I realized that my silence was a form of cowardice that I had dressed up in the expensive clothes of a boundary. The house was a temple to my own vanity, and now that the worshiper was gone, the idols were falling to the ground. I reached for my cold phone to send a desperate message, but my fingers froze over the darkened glass screen. What could I possibly say to a man I had spent an entire decade slowly pushing into a deep and dark abyss now? An apology would be just another selfish way to demand his attention, and I knew I did not deserve any now. The irreversible consequence of my pride was that he had finally learned how to live without my cold voice. I walked past his favorite empty chair, and I felt the heavy ghost of his presence mocking my own loneliness. I had won the war of silence, but the only prize was a hollow house where my own breath felt like a scream now. Moral discomfort settled in my stomach like a cold lead weight that I would carry for the rest of my life. I saw a photo of us from 5 years ago, and I realized I was already pulling away in that very small moment. My face was a mask of cold indifference, while he was leaning in trying to catch a tiny spark of warmth here. Now he is probably talking to someone who actually answers his questions with a kind and open heart today. The thought of him being happy without me is the sharpest pain I have ever felt in my entire life today now. I used my silence to protect myself, but I only succeeded in creating a void that no one can ever fill here. Being 34 and alone in a world of my own making is a heavy sentence I must serve every single day now. Every quiet room I enter for the rest of my life will remind me of the man I destroyed with my own big pride. There is no redemption for a person who uses love as a psychological battlefield for their own ego and power. I am the queen of a silent kingdom, and my only subject is the regret that follows me into the cold night air. I hope he never looks back at the cold woman I was, because he deserves a voice that speaks only the truth. I sit here in the dark wondering if I can ever learn to be human again without needing to control it all now.